What's up, guys? I'm Jed. Grab some snacks and settle in because this could be a long one. Woo! Oh, she is chilly. Bang! Alright, no BS time wasting today. Like it, subscribe it, blah blah. Go listen to Real Big Fish Beer and let's get into it. You know what? You're probably going to need a beer after we're done with this one because I have a feeling this is going to be a pretty long one. So sorry in advance, but we've got a lot to get through. And if you do crack a beer, let me know in the comments down below what it is that you're having. I recommend Bolter Hazy IPA. That is delicious. Alright, let's do it. That shit is tasty. Today we're talking about the Sony A7 III against my new main squeeze, the Sony A7S III. Alright, let's just dive straight into some comparisons, and if you don't really care about the comparisons and you just want my final thoughts, I'll leave a timestamp around here of where the concluding thoughts are, so if you just want that, skip ahead. If not, buckle in because we're going to go on a journey. I want to real quickly preface this whole thing by saying kind of my photo and video kind of mantra, if you will. And this applies to all things visual, be it graphic design or whatever. If it looks good, it is good. I find this very true because there's all these rules out there, composition and whatever. But if you take a photo that breaks these rules and it's sick, well, it's sick. It's not, you know, it looks good, but you didn't follow these rules, so sorry, it's not very cool anymore. If it looks good, it is good. And use this as you will to inspire you in any way. If it means that you don't need the best camera gear to take the best photo, because amazing cameras take shit photos too. But at the end of the day, obviously good cameras do help, but it is you that creates what is seen. And if you can create epic stuff with your phone, bloody good job. And if you can make amazing stuff with a 1DX Mark III, bloody good job. Just want to say that. In visual stuff, it is all about the destination, not the journey. So here we've got two pictures taken at the same settings, one with the A7 III, one with the S3. Let's take a quick little peep. So both of these are amazing quality. I will give the tick to the A7 III in this case because it does have that bigger megapixel count. And that means if we want to, we can now print larger than we can with the A7S III. But bigger isn't always better. The less megapixels on the A7S III means it takes in more light, and that means low light situations, it's going to take the cake. If you'd like to know a little bit more about low resolution versus high resolution, I just made a video comparing the A7S III and the A7R4. Go check it out after this video. So the A7S III does take the cake over the A7 III in low light situations. Be that as it may, the A7 III is actually quite exceptional considering it's 24 megapixels, so don't be afraid either way to take photos in low light. Speaking of low light, this means the ISO has to be pushed to its limits. 4K 24p, same settings, same subject. Let's have a bit of a blind test. I'll put the results up at the end. Let me know in the comments if you got it right.
Ladies and gentlemen, very good. Today, once again, welcome aboard my body captain. Just going to get ready to go on from 20 times today, so it's made a beat.
What did you think? Did you get it right? Were you surprised? Now, 4K 120p versus 1080 120p. The 4K 120p is just beautiful. It is absolutely amazing. The 1080 120 is still pretty good, but it's like walking into a Tesla dealership. You really want the brand new, the stainless steel, shiny Cybertruck, and well, you'll leave with one of these. It's still good, it does the same job, but it's not quite what you wanted. It's not the Cybertruck, you feel me? The next one will be the A7 III cropped in camera 1.5 times to get that extra zoom range. And then what we're going to do is film the A7S III at 4K and then punching down that 1.5 times down to 1080p. And we'll see what those two results look like. Anyway, nothing too scientific, just a little bit of fun. And now let's get on to the next one. Alright, while we're at it, here's a quick little S and Q comparison. I really didn't want to do this one because it is pretty unfair to the Sony A7 III because the S3 does technically have it beat by quite a long way. But screw it, here we are, let's do it. 4K 120 S and Q against 1080 S and Q from the Sony A7 III. You tell me what you think's the best. I think the Sony A7 III is better by a country mile. If you do want to know more about Sony S&Q on the A7 III against the full scale 120p, I did actually make a video. Please go check that one out there if you care about that. Needless to say, anything visual is subjective. If you think something looks better, well, like I said, if it looks good, it is good. Go run with that. Next up, we've got focusing. Now, over my use of the Sony A7 III for the last 2 years, I'd personally find it to be better at focusing in HD as opposed to 4K. Now, take it for what it's worth, but it still is a very solid focusing system in HD and 4K. Also take note that the A7S III has IAF in all video modes as well as the live pattern detect, which is just sticky like glue. It is great. So take that as you will, but look at this shot here. This is on the A7S III. I'm holding MJ, the little doggo, and it doesn't deviate off my eye at all. It doesn't even get confused with MJ. I love it. It's my personal opinion that I've formed over the last 2 years using the A7 III that it was built to be a full HD camera, a 1080p camera if you will. Everything it does in 1080, it does better than at 4K. You've obviously got the high frame rates that it doesn't have in 4K. I found it to focus better in 1080, you've got tracking focus, and all these things just, to me, worked better in 1080 than it did in 4K. And it overheats in 4K, which is a little bit of a bummer. But you know what, when it does work, the 4K is brilliant. It's super sharp and I do really enjoy the look of it. On the flip side, the A7S III, got no overheating problems. I'm sure someone on YouTube's found a way to overheat it, but I've not had an issue. I shoot a lot of 4K on it, especially 4K 120, and I'm good. I love it. The A7S III does have all focus modes across every resolution and maximum data flow and 10-bit color, 8-bit, whatever. It has it available in all of the highest quality features, so that's a super handy thing if you're looking for those high-end tools. Another difference between the S3 and the 7 III is the color science. The S3 does have updated color science, which is derived from the higher-end Cine line cameras. Now this is really good if you're using the S3 as a B cam to an FX9 or something like maybe the new FS6 or something like that, or the Venice. But this is going to be really good and fit into that workflow a whole lot easier. And even if you're not using those Cine cameras, just using it as your main squeeze, you're going to get some really epic colors and more natural skin tones as well. Check out these straight out of camera results. No picture profile, just standard box settings. And now take a look at these results using S-Log3. Speaking of S-Log3, in the A7S III, our base ISO is lower, which is super handy, and it means that we don't have to have our ISO quite as high when we're shooting in the middle of the day. On the A7 III, you have to have a minimum ISO of 800. On the S3, natively, we have the ISO at 640. We can also drop that ISO down below our native rating, which is super duper handy. So if you left your ND filters at home, you still might be safe. And speaking of color, the A7 III will give you 8-bit color, whereas the A7S III will give you 10-bit. And if you're a filmmaker, you'll literally love this camera almost on that alone. And if you're not familiar with 8-bit and 10-bit, 8-bit means that the camera can capture 16.7 million different colors, whereas 10-bit can actually capture 1.1 billion colors. So it's a massive difference there. The A7S III via an external recorder like an Atomos Ninja can also record 16-bit raw video compressed into a 12-bit file. That means it can literally show like trillions of colors or something stupid like that. So one of the main physical differences between the cameras is the A7S III is thick. It's thicker. It's a thick boy. It's a thick shake. It's a thick Rick. Thick. I love it. So imagine the A7 III got stung by a bee or a wasp. Probably more like a bee. I think a wasp would swell up a bit too much. It's basically a swollen A7 III. It's just a little bit thicker, a bit juicier, and fits in the hand a bit better. But one of the most noticeable physical differences is the flippy floppy screen, and I'm sure you've heard almost every YouTuber bang on about it, and let me address that one first. So obviously shooting videos like this of myself, I'm right now filming on the A7R4 and I can't see myself, and so I've got to gauge myself off a monitor on my computer. So if I had a camera like this where I could see myself on the screen, that would make things a lot easier. So for vlogging or shots like this, super handy. But I'm actually not opposed to the flip out screen. You see, a flip out screen like this means that when I'm shooting other style of video, be it B-roll or client work and whatnot, my lens is in line with my eyes, which is in line with my screen. So everything my body is doing is in line with one straight sort of axis. Where I'm shooting with a flip out screen, it means that if I want that screen angled at all, I have to be off kilter and looking to the side. And I know that's just a little nitpicky thing, It's just because I'm used to this. I haven't used a flip around screen since the A7D. That was the last Canon camera I had. And you know what? I was used to it then. It's all I knew, and I'm sure I'll get used to it now. It's just one little gripe that I have. But look, I'm very thankful that these companies are listening to the consumers who are buying their products. So that's a massive win. One side note, I do think the S1H still has the best screen on the market because it flips out and it flips around. I'd love to see all cameras have that. A7S IV, Sony, 2025, you're listening? But you know what? We'll take the little victories. I'm happy it's got the flip around screen, helps me with videos like this. The other major difference between the screens is the sheer quality. The resolution is not a massive jump, but it is there, but the touch functionality. The touch functionality on the S3 works much better than the A7 III. The A7 III is more or less touch to focus, and that's it. With the A7S III, you can touch through all your menus, scroll just like a phone. I was a little bit reserved. I thought it wasn't going to be super responsive. It feels just like a phone, and I'm very happy with that. I have heard a few Canon shooters and other people on YouTube complaining that you can't touch to change your ISO, your shutter speed, or your aperture. I don't really care. I find dials for those things are so much more accurate, and the Sonys are set up very well for their dials for that, whereas some of the Canon cameras that are able to do the touchscreen for that aren't quite as well set up with having to press multiple buttons to get to a certain setting. So I'm not really bothered by that. One thing I will say, the new menu system has taken a little bit of getting used to, and it's a little bit unfortunate that my A7R4 is staying on the older menu system, so now I have to remember where everything is across two different menus. One thing I will say, a lot of people have directed a lot of hate at Sony's menus for a long time. I don't mind them. The first time I picked up a Sony camera, I started going through the system and I felt like I understood it, and it's felt natural to me ever since. I've not really got on the bandwagon and understood where the hates come from, because now I go back to using Canon cameras, which are considered some of the easy ones, and that seems like quite a difficult menu. I can't find what I'm looking for. Things don't feel like they should be in the right place. Whatever camera you buy, you'll understand that menu, you'll learn it. People just want to find a reason to hate on stuff because they don't have it, they're jealous, whatever, they think their camera brand's better. Who gives a shit? Enjoy what you enjoy. I personally find the A7S screen a lot better quality. Now this might be to the jump in resolution, but I find it to be a lot more trustworthy and reliable when kind of gauging your colors and your exposure from the screen. In my experience with the A7 III, I found the screen to be unreliable and the metering to kind of be off. So I would look at the screen and go, you know what, I think I've nailed exposure there. I'd get it back to the computer and it's completely overexposed. And that's one reason I didn't really like to shoot log with the A7 III, because I couldn't trust the screen and the metering, and also when you've only got 8-bit profile, trying to bring back those colors in log can be very, very difficult. James Matthews actually does a very good video, I'll link up here, explaining the difference between 8-bit and 10-bit using a rubber band analogy, and it's very, very accurate. I'm a very visual learner, it's a great way for you people like me as well. I don't know if I can link his videos here. If I can't, I'll link it in the description below. I find that the S-Log3 Gamma Assist on the A7S III does work a lot better than the A7 III. And you should expect that because this is a video making machine. I do find it to be a lot more reliable, and it feels like you're not shooting log, which, especially if you're new to log, is amazing. If you don't know what log is, it's a super flat profile. You pull all the data back later. So to not have to think you might be overexposed is super duper handy. It makes it feel just right. One extra bonus physical difference, if you will, there's plenty of them, but this is one that has stood out to me. Forever, when you were taking video on the A7 III, you had the little tabs. These guys, making unnecessary noise, and if you're vlogging and you can't hear what you're saying, it's really annoying, and these rattly things, they take up all the audio. The A7 III, can't hear it. The only sound you can hear there is the IBIS rattling on the inside. You think about it, that IBIS is working when you're vlogging, you're going to get no extra sound. So thank you, Sony, for listening, and thank you for fixing it with whatever magic wizardry you did. It's amazing. I love it. It's great. Next up, we have rolling shutter. If you don't know what rolling shutter is, basically it's the camera's ability to keep straight lines straight. A camera with bad rolling shutter, when you pan from left to right, will have straight lines, and they kind of turn into this like jello-y sort of shape. So it's much, much better on the A7S III than it was on the A7 III. Now, don't let the big YouTubers fool you. It's not gone. It's still there, it's just a hell of a lot better. As you go to a higher shutter speed, whether you're trying to block out light or get a crisper image for slow motion, rolling shutter does get worse. But it's a hell of a lot better than it was. Thanks, Sony. See for yourself.
Direction you're from, please right turn after departure. Chris down to 36,000 feet. Hold on, headwind.
Now we've arrived at some of the technical side of things. The codec. The Sony A7 III shoots lower data rates, which makes sense because it's a hybrid camera shooting with an 8-bit codec. The A7S III is a professional filmmaking tool, and as you would expect in a professional filmmaking tool, you'd expect to have high bit rates and high data flow files, and that's exactly what we've got. In the A7S III, we find ourselves with a few different 4K movie types. We have 4K HS, we have 4K S, we have 4K SI. My experience with the A7S III has led me to believe that the 4K HS, which is a H.265 codec, doesn't love to be edited. Basically what this file is, it's a big file that's compressed very well down into a smaller package without losing detail. Now what this means is that because it's H.265 as opposed to the normal H.264, this requires a lot more computing power, and my $6,000 MacBook can't use it. You're going to have to transcode media or work off proxies unless you've got a stupid fast like Mac Pro or something like that. So if you like working on proxies and you don't mind transcoding, this is an awesome option for you because your file sizes are going to be really small. The next file type that also, in my experience, doesn't love to be edited is the 4KS. This is a long GOP or long GOP, I don't know how you actually meant to say that. It's a long GOP file and it's great. The files are not quite as small as the H.265, but thus smaller than the SI files. Now the 4K SI files, which is the all intro recording, is a bigger file, and I'm talking double the size of H.265. However, for some reason, I find that to edit very, very easily, which is a little bit counterintuitive being the biggest file type, but I don't build the computers, I just use them. So if you don't know the difference between long GOP interframe or all-I intraframe, have no fear. So the way an interframe or long GOP or long GOP file works is basically parts of the frame that don't move, it's only going to reference the previous image. It's not going to keep adding more and more data where it doesn't need to be. So let's take the background for instance. That's not changing until my arm comes in front. So if we've got 24 frames and each of those frames my hand doesn't come in front, well it's only going to use one of the blacks on the snowboard behind me for all of those frames. So it's discarding the rest of that image so it doesn't store unnecessary data. Whereas the all-I or the intra frame is going to add essentially 24 different photos and stitch it all together. So that's going to give us the best quality, but it's also going to be the biggest data file. So if you don't like high data flow, it's probably not for you, but if you want the best quality, well baby, this is the one to go with. Before we wrap up, we've got two final comparisons to go through, so we're nearly there guys. Trust me. I want to go home. Well, I am home, but it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I just want to get this done. IBIS, or in-body image stabilization, or as Sony likes to call it, steady shot. The steady shot built inside has been improved on the A7S III. We also have active mode, which basically it's going to crop in, but it's going to give us a better stabilization. We also have gyroscopic information. The S3 has a gyro inside. That data is sent through to a Sony software that you plug into, stabilize your footage in there, and it calculates that data with the footage, some wizardry, don't ask questions, it just does it, and it produces some amazing results with no gimbal, just a camera. This will add an extra step to the workflow, but it can produce some amazing results, especially if you don't have a gimbal. The final talking point for today is storage. The storage in the Sony A7 III is dual SD card slots. It has one UHS 2 compatible and one UHS 1. The Sony A7S III has dual UHS 2 cards, but also inside those the ability to put CF Express Type A cards. Now CF Express Type A cards are bloody expensive, but they're bloody sick. The Sony A7S III has dual UHS 2 card slots as well as CF Express Type A slots. The CF Express Type A are super duper fast, but they are pretty pricey. But if you want the highest quality video, let's say your 4K 120 10-bit 422 all intra, you are going to need one of these little suckers. The best tools need the best accessories. If you do want to record the highest quality video, you will need a CF Express Type A card. And if you don't go with CF Express Type A, I do recommend at least getting a V90 UHS 2 card. These are almost equally as expensive, and if you're going to avoid that, it's a V60 or it's nothing. V60 will let you use a fair amount of the features, V90 will let you use most, CF Express Type A will let you use them all. Don't bother with a V30. Just quickly while we're on the topic of expensive media, I've heard a lot of people complaining about the price, and yeah, look, I understand, I get it. No one wants to spend lots of money on SD cards or CF Express. But if you want the best results, you do need to do that. The funny thing is most of the people complaining aren't going to buy an A7S III anyway. They just need an excuse to have a whinge. Most A7S III customers understand that this is a pro filmmaking tool and it needs pro storage. So there's nothing sexy about storage. Quote by me today, 2020. But you know what there is something sexy about? 4K, 120, 10-bit, 422. Woo! You make my heart sing. To get the sexier results, you need the not so sexy storage. And just as there's no point having the best camera in the world with the worst lens, it's the same thing goes for the storage. If you want to utilize the full capabilities of the camera, you need the storage to match. Maybe storage is sexy. Anyway, somehow we've made it here to the conclusion. So, A, thanks for sticking around. B, if you have stuck around and you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe. C, give it a big old fat thumbs up. And D, let's get into it. It comes with some really solid image quality, especially if you want to print your images or recompose in post. That's a solid plus over the S3. Now the A7 III is still very good in low light, especially when it's put up against the similar tiered cameras. And while there are some downsides like the screen quality or no 4K 60, 4K 120, overheating in 4K, it's 8-bit not 10-bit, that's not enough to deter most customers. And if your budget sits around 3,000 Australian or 2,000 American, this is still my #1 camera to go to on the market. Take my word for it. I bought this camera with my own money and I've had it for over 2 years and I've loved every minute of it. If you're looking at an A7 III or something thereabouts, the other camera I would seriously consider is the Lumix S1. The sheer size of it and the lack of lenses might be enough to turn a few noses the other way, and I suppose that's probably what the Lumix S5 is for. It's a little bit smaller. So maybe consider that, especially if you're on the video side of things. Although autofocus in video is not really Panasonic's strong suit, and one of the major reasons I swapped from the S1H to the A7S III. So take that as you will. So the A7S III, solid contender in any battle. Now on to old mate, or should I say new mate. The A7S III comes in at about double the price of the A7 III. We're looking at about 5,800 Australian dollars. Now, as crazy as this might sound, I do think even at close to $6,000, the A7S III may even be underpriced. I do think it's at a bit of a sweet spot where Sony's still going to move a fair few units and the customer's still getting a good value buy. But I think if it was to be more expensive, you'd still be getting a really good value camera, especially if you're a working professional or you do this on the side for a bit of money. And let's pretend you have this camera for 2 or 3 years, you're going to make that money back in no time. Your production value is going to go much higher, you're going to attract bigger, better clients and be able to charge more for your productions. The video quality out of the A7S III is absolutely superb. It is something special. It's like a wizard came in and did its thing and here it is. If you're a filmmaker and you're choosing between both of these cameras and the budget is there, I would highly recommend going for the A7S III. All of the frame rates, the resolutions, the 10-bit 422 codecs is going to be absolutely crucial when trying to come up with the best quality production and get what's in here onto your screen. Even the 240 frames at 1080p is very, very usable. That's just another string in a very strong bow. Photo quality is exactly what you'd expect from a camera of this price. It is very good quality. However, do be aware it is 12 megapixels, so you're not going to be able to blow this up ridiculously sized. However, the advantage of that, like we've gone over, is our low light photography is going to be epic because our ISO stays down so low. Astro shooters, this might be a goer for you. Also, dual gain ISO. They don't really say it's got it, but everyone kind of knows it has it. At 12,800 ISO, it just cleans up. It's unreal. That's a massive win, especially that low light shooting. Woo, baby. So as the perfect camera does exist and likely never will, because as technology gets better and better and better, our expectations get bigger and bigger and bigger. But for the filmmaker and all of us, and definitely for myself, this is about as close as perfect can be. It's incredible value, and the results from this camera, they speak for themselves. They can very much be confused for that of a Cinecam, and if you don't believe me, I'm going to link a video down below by a channel I just stumbled across called Orcs Out. I think that's how you say it. I believe it's a Japanese couple, and their stuff they are making is incredible. The cinematic vlog that was shot on the A7S III looks exactly that, cinematic. It's got the Cine in there, it looks just like a cinema camera. I'm absolutely amazed at what they came up with. If you can tell me that you watched that video and you don't think it's shot on a cinema camera, you've either got some really good eyes or you're lying. Also, if you go watch their video, make sure you tell them I sent you. So all these features and the borderline cinema camera quality absolutely unreal. In a run and gun package this size, it's just another reason that this is such good value for money. If you're a social media shooter, shooting for cafes and gyms, and it's just all your content is purely going for social media, 12 megapixels is more than enough for your stills. So this might be the perfect camera out there. And if we had more megapixels, we wouldn't have that low light quality that we know and love. There's nothing worse than getting back from a shoot, having this epic shot, and then having it look like this, all noisy. So in summary, both of these cameras are absolutely incredible buys, but I do need to say, if you're into low light photography or videography and you're a filmmaker, the A7S is a no-brainer. And that's why I'm sticking with the A7S and I'm moving on from the A7 III. You can't go wrong either way. Well, that's it. Thanks so much for sticking around to the end. If you made it this far, please give it a big fat thumbs up, subscribe, hit the bell. If you like this review, this is my first proper review. If you want more of them, comment below, tell me what you want me to get my hands on, and I'll do my best. Anyway, bye! It's 2:10 on a Thursday morning. I'm lucky I'm not working tomorrow. I'm meant to be up to go shoot some videos down south tomorrow, and I'm knackered. I was meant to actually go out and shoot the low light portion of this tonight, but I don't know if I really want to be in town at 3, 4 in the morning. Not because it's unsafe, just because I don't have the energy. So the low light portion of this, which will come before this in the video, was actually shot after. Go figure. Alright, I'm going to bed. Lucky I don't have far to go. But if I lift this up, you'll see all the shit that I was hiding under there because it was on my table. Bye! Hey, Steve! Maybe storage is sexy.